tonight's conversation. Stephen, thanks for joining us tonight. And I suppose, could I just ask you, in light of current the week that we've had in Northern Ireland, how that has made you feel?
I suppose you mean the resignation of Arlene Foster, or the?
Yes, yeah.
Well, the events leading up to that, I suppose there is disquiet over the Northern Ireland Protocol, which obviously can't be changed. Otherwise, Ireland would find itself out of the EU. It's that simple. I mean, if we were to compromise the border in any way, then the EU would probably just erect the border on mainland Europe, and we would be out. So we can't afford for this to be compromised. The EU did very well with the protocol. It could have, the backstop would have also been very good, but the hard line taken by the DUP is regrettable. They could have got a much better deal from Theresa May's compromise. But be that as it may, I think what Arlene Foster's resignation signifies is that we're heading for an even more determined DUP in the north to make it difficult for everybody. So I think from our point of view, from the point of view of, you see behind me, Truth and Reconciliation Platform, it's the organization, TARP we call it, and anybody that wants to know more about it can look at tarp.global. But we believe that there will be challenges ahead. I also think that because there's so much talk now about perhaps a border poll or a united Ireland, which most of us believe is inevitable, I think that a young political party like yourselves, based in the Republic, as opposed to, say, other parties that have experience and plenty of experienced people to give them an insight into what happened. A young political party like yourselves, hopefully we will be able to contribute to your understanding of what happened. And the way TARP works, we believe, we're a young organization too, although some of us are old people like myself. I was 70 in January, and my co-founder Eugene Reevy is 73, I think, Eugene. But we believe that truth, history, basically, should not be rewritten, because you'll be wrong-footed and you will enter the negotiations, the inevitable ones that are going to happen now, and the inevitable talks that you're going to engage in over the next few years, uninformed, if you get the wrong information or if you listen to people who rewrite history. Now, that doesn't mean that because of my experience or Eugene Reevy's experience, Eugene's 3 brothers were murdered in Whitecross on 6th of January 1976, 3 innocent young lads, simply because they were Catholics. But many people in our organization, come from the Unionist PUL community. So we're very well balanced, as was our band, Miami Showband, back in 1975. So we think that the safest way and the most informed way to advise and to let people know what they're dealing with is to have a non-biased history and truth told to you. But we wouldn't be arrogant enough to say that my truth, and having said that, there is only one truth, but that my opinions, my bias, or whatever there might be, is not what you should be subjected to. That the best way to do it is to have the stories told and the information given to you by those on whom history impacted most. And that's a balanced view from the victims, because they have no agenda. Just simply, they want to be acknowledged. There are over 3,500 people killed and well over 40,000 people injured during the conflict. and every one of them has a legitimate right to tell their story, and they have a very, very valuable input for a number of reasons. To tell their story is very, very important because they get acknowledgement, and they get and they're people who they lost, or perhaps themselves who were injured. They're acknowledged. But more importantly is that we don't make the same mistakes that we made before. And so hopefully TARP, by engaging with yourselves, can contribute to your understanding of what you're about to enter into. So how we do it is that we give people a platform. So the three words in our organization are truth and reconciliation platform. They're written like that very deliberately. First of all, we believe that reconciliation is necessary for peace. But truth must come first. You must know the truth. You must know why you're reconciling. And then the platform is the podium that we afford people. We're lucky insofar as there are a number of terrible atrocities that happened during the conflict. That I imagine maybe 10, less than 10, that people would regard as high profile. For instance, Dublin Monaghan bombings, which were the largest a single day, and the loss of life in a single day. Obviously, Bloody Sunday. Then you would have Oma, Enniskillen. The Miami Showband would be another one, mainly because of the profile. We're probably the best known throughout the world because of the Netflix documentary. I was very, very lucky with that, and then it got an extra boost last year when it was Emmy nominated. So people who couldn't find Ireland on the map will know about this. But there are 3,500 other people whose stories need to be told and who can contribute to your understanding of what happened. And they come from both communities. That's not just to say that the people either responsible or impacted came just from those communities. They did, but also they came from security forces as well. So there's a big, big story to be told here. And hopefully, as you go forward as a new party, as a young party, that you'll have a very, very reliable source of information to draw from. And that would hopefully that you'll get some of that from our organization. That's it in a nutshell.
Absolutely. And I think you definitely strike a good point that you can't have a reconciliation that's not based on truth, that you have to be aware of the facts underlying. I know from the documentary, for anyone who watched it, there was a number of references to collusion from the British Army in the attack on the Miami Showband. And in it, then what was the purpose? Other issues that came up around assassination attempt on Charles Haughey as well, and all of these things that I know from my own I wasn't familiar with beforehand. And hi, Gary, just joining us.
Hey, Dave, how are you?
Hi, Gary.
Stephen, how are you, my friend? You well?
Good, thanks. Good to see you.
It's really great to see you here, but really great. Have you done a good job introducing you?
Oh, marvelous.
What would you give them out of 10?
11, like the amplifier.
Sorry, Dave, continue, mate.
No, sorry. To be honest, I was doing a terrible job of introductions, but Stephen was more than able to introduce himself. When Stephen had just introduced TARP to us, and I'll hand over to you as well, Gary, if that's all right.
Yeah. Because I was just really excited tonight to introduce somebody of all the admiration in the world for, which is Stephen. I've met Stephen, I think it was about 3 years ago now, and I think you'll all get to know Stephen because over the weekend I discovered that Stephen has joined the Social Democrats, which was a huge source of pride to myself and I think the rest of the parliamentary party when we discovered that would be the case. I think Stephen just exudes humanity, and he has a cause and a quest that is bigger than the usual to and fro that happens here in the convention centre and in Leinster House and we're all fighting each other. I think Stephen has a vision for an Ireland of peace and an Ireland of truth, and I think his experiences give him all the legitimacy in the world to herald that call. So I think anybody such as ourselves who have the audacity to get involved in politics need to be listening to the experiences of Stephen and the people who Stephen has met in his life. So Stephen, I hope you don't mind if I maybe pass over to yourself and you can tell us, we all know, I think most of us know who you are, but you can just tell us whatever you'd like to tell us, because our responsibility is to echo your words.
Thanks, Gary. I did, just before you came, I outlined the work of TARP and hopefully what we can contribute. And again, I would reiterate that it's not just our version of history, because the danger is rewriting history has been done to suit a certain agenda. So what we have to do is to hear the voices of everyone who's impacted, so that we don't make the same mistakes again, and that also that we know how to deal with them. One of the reasons, obviously, one of the reasons that I decided to join the Social Democrats, and I really feel privileged to join. The reason, there was a few reasons, but mainly because of Gary's influence, and I saw how well he was, how diligently he was working with the schools project, and then as a Dublin City Councillor, you roped us in and got us to do some of the work with you with regard to counter-radicalization of young people being drawn into violence with the drugs gangs, and it was inspirational to watch Gary and the energy that he had. So hopefully we'll be able to contribute, as I say, not just our voices, but the voices of the hundreds, thousands of people who engage with us in TARP. And we've managed to get to have an audience right around the world, as I say, mainly because of the profile we received from the Netflix documentary. But we've worked with the usual suspects, the likes of RTE and UTV and all of the rest of them. But we've also worked with ARD, the Germans, the Dutch. We've worked with we've even worked with Al Jazeera. So so we have a long reach for a small organization like ourselves. We also reach over into Capitol Hill and getting our point across. And the point of TARP is simply is to make sure that people are informed. I think I mentioned to you at one stage, Gary, that the sad and the tragic thing is that that if we were to, and we did consider doing this before the lockdown happened, but have a survey taken in the main cities, in Dublin, say at the top of Grafton Street, or Belfast outside the Castle Court, or Derry maybe, and just ask the first 1,000 people, if they could answer a couple of simple questions. And we think we know the answers already, but say, for instance, if you were to ask people if they could tell the date of the Dublin and Monaghan bombings, for instance, or when they happened, or who was responsible, or name any single person who was killed during those, I would imagine that 99% of the people wouldn't know. It's not their fault. It's simply that they haven't been told it. To talk about the problems that this country was facing right for the past 50 years was a taboo subject even on our national broadcaster. And whereas that may have been, these things may have been an inconvenient truth, it's sad that people don't understand, because now as we face potential trouble again, we're not prepared for it. It's a bit like the pandemic. We spend so much money on weapons of mass destruction and very little on the type of medicines and things like that we could have perhaps been better prepared for these things. We were already warned by Obama and people like that a pandemic could happen. So I think it's the same with this. We see the upsurge in violence in the north, which could easily spread down here unless people are informed better. So hopefully TARP can, through the testimony of our people, inform the Social Democrats, and so is that a young party like yourself
Stephen, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but we've lost you, if you can.
Stephen? Not sure if you're able to hear us, sir.
I'll give Stephen a call and see if he can hear us. Just 1 second. Stephen's gone off the call. Okay, he probably tried to log back in a second. I do think this is an area that we, when in the Social Democrats, need to be strong. We need to start preparing ourselves to be strong on. I think the next decade of conversations around what type of united island as opposed to Ireland is going to emerge is going to generate conversations and discussions that we can't leave ourselves to the side of. So it's one of the reasons that, and we can't let others just simply take ownership of that conversation. So there you are, Stephen.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how much of that you missed.
I think we missed the, we missed, what part did we miss from? You were gone for a few minutes.
For about 4 minutes ago, you dropped out.
As I say, I would love to see you get a presence in the north. Did you get that part? Yeah.
No, we didn't get that part when you talked about getting a presence in the north. And I think it's an important conversation, Stephen. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah. The reason being, the usual mistake would be to go up north, open an office, and try to recruit people. I don't think that's the answer. I think that because that frightens people, and also I don't think it's the right way to engage, because as yet the language perhaps wouldn't be honed in. But I think what would be important, and I'd love to see happen, would be that you as a party, a young party, would engage in certain projects, maybe twinning, engage in schools projects and things like that, so as that you can be trusted, and you get their trust, to avoid all the mistakes that perhaps people like me from the south made, because we take it for granted that their language is the same as ours. It isn't. There's a lot of suspicion. There's a lot of people feel that there's huge differences, and there are, but we have an awful lot in common. So there are lots and lots of things that I would love to see a party as vibrant and as young as yourselves engage in the north, and we would love to be part of that.
Stephen, how do we go about making contacts and connections in that regard? And I'd say Arlene Foster resigned yesterday. Well, she was forced out yesterday because of not even opposing conversion therapy, but simply abstaining on a vote around it. And something like that, I mean, is absolute anathema to the values of almost absolutely everybody on this call. But yeah, I suppose there has been other times in our history where people have had to talk to people who they would fundamentally have disagreed to, and trying to find common ground. How do we even kind of think about those sort of things?
I think what you should bear in mind is that in any situation, any crisis especially, that it's the extreme voices that you're listening to, because the moderate voices aren't being heard. So you hear the voices, the ridiculous creationist voices, and these people who are like what they often refer to as dinosaurs. But there's a middle ground here. There are many, very, very many moderate people within that you should hear, and the way to do that is to listen to them. If you listen to the Nolan show in the mornings, you'll hear the people shouting from both ends. Now, sometimes it's necessary to have the polar opposites come together so as that the middle ground can also that we're able to find agreement, because without the extremes, it's not possible. But sometimes we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and what happens is that we completely disregard the voices of the moderate voices, and it's the vast majority The really tragic thing about the silent majority is that they're silent, but they're nevertheless they are there. So give a voice to the moderate people, and make sure that our broadcasters are also put on the spot and told that they should do this as well. Everything from the Claire Byrne show to everybody else, they should have the moderates. We've often said that peace can be boring, whereas people who make war and rattle the sabers, these are people are very exciting people. I mean, which was it's going to turn on a movie at night and watch somebody make peace rather than somebody make love or make war? You know, it doesn't. It's not exciting. But TARP is different, as you know, Gary. The stories that you'll hear in TARP are the most distressing and horrific stories that anyone can ever hear. You know, there are just a number of examples. I mean, how many of us would have ever heard the name of Kathleen Gillespie? Very few. And she's just somebody that I picked off the top of my head there. Kathleen Gillespie is a lady. She lives in Derry, and her husband they're a Catholic family. Her husband's name was Patsy Gillespie, and because he wanted to feed his family, he decided to take a job. I think it was either as a cleaner or a cook or something like that in a British army barracks or something. The man was completely innocent. So the IRA decided to make an example of him. Went in, held the family hostage, strapped Patsy into a car, and made him drive a bomb to a British Army checkpoint. When he got there, he opened the window and he shouted out, "Run, I'm loaded." Now, this is a decent man, never did anything to anyone in his life. And I asked Kathleen, when she did a TARP event with us in University of Ulster in Derry, I asked her, I said, you know, what is the abiding pain? And it was mostly a rhetorical question, because most of us know this. Most of the people in TARP understand these things. And she told me that the abiding pain is that she couldn't find any piece of Patsy to bury. Now, these are the stories. For anyone to say that a story like that doesn't shock you or pin you to your seat, but there are 3,500 and more stories like this. So the value of TARP is that we're not boring. As you know, I was one of 8 programs, and God knows how it happened, but on the remastered series in Netflix. And when they rang me, I thought that they just wanted some kind of an interview or something like that. And then I realized that my story was going to be one of 8 stories, and the other people, I asked who the other people were, and they said Sam Cooke and Johnny Cash and Bob Marley and all that. And I thought I was going to put the phone down. I thought this was some kind of this is a joke. And yet, what happened was amazing, is that our program, this little unknown band from a country that, as I say, people couldn't even find on the map, was the most watched of the entire series, simply because there's a story that resonates throughout the world. There's conflict, there's corruption, there's collusion, and all of these things happening in every single country that I know. There's very, very little, nobody's perfect. But what I think is essential, and I think it's within your gift and you can be part of a healing that's really, really important. This country needs healing. Just the Republic itself is still fighting a civil war. North and South needs healing. And these islands, Ireland, Great Britain, we need healing. We need somebody just to stand out there and say, you know what? Just as I did at the end of the Netflix documentary, when I spoke to Winston Irvine, when he tried to mitigate the circumstances that were that killed our lads, and I just said to him, it was a disaster for everyone, and that's what we need to stand up and say, and but there's an awful lot of people, moderate people, and people who are willing to do this, and we need to listen to them. I'm just one of them.
By the way, guys, if anybody wants to jump in and ask Stephen a question, you know our rule here is to interject politely and just come in if you want to. So do that. Everyone except for you, Chris. I'm joking. If anybody wants to come in and ask a question, please feel free to do so. Stephen, you've met some incredible people over your time. There's some incredible just statesmen, and we never really got the chance to. Elaine, are you coming in here? I think you might have fallen there. Okay. Who, in terms of an example to follow, like what was people like Seamus Mallon and so John Hume like?
John, I got to know, but when I got to know John, he was at the beginning of dementia. So we would, there were times when he was very lucid. I remember having dinner with him one night, and he knew more about the music business than I did. He was very, very smart, very clever fella, lovely man. Seamus Mallon, I got very close to. Seamus was, John was the ideas man, and he was brilliant. Seamus was also brilliant, but he got things done and he took no prisoners. We were having dinner one night before we did a tarp event at the Moy, and Eugene Reevy, who he knew all his life and loved Eugene, but they're two fanatical football fans, Eugene and I really thought that Seamus and Eugene were going to go at each other over the table over a football match. So he was, the point I'm making is that he was a normal person, and his strength, just as John's strength was that they were normal and they could speak about normal things. John could talk to me about show bands and pop groups and all of the bands and the music and the dancing, and Seamus was the same. And so I suppose what I'm saying is that very, very ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Not to say that they were ordinary; they were my heroes, but wonderful. And I hope that that they continue to influence us. Certainly, continue to influence me. There are still people in our circle that we go to for advice. I mean, people like Dr. Rory O'Hanlon, former Count Corla. He would be a huge influence on us. A very, very wise man, a very knowledgeable man. They're good people, and they're from all parties. So definitely, of all the people that I ever met that impacted on me most, probably weren't politicians or statesmen. I never forget meeting ABBA, so maybe you can chalk that one down.
When did you meet ABBA?
1975, I think. Yeah, and the Gresham.
That would have been the same year, Stephen, as was that before or after?
Oh, it was afterwards. Yeah, afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's very random. And Stephen, just in terms of ourselves, like moving forward, like we need to be builders. And what does builders look like in terms of building peace and building? What would you like to see from a young, kind of vibrant party? And on this call, you're going to have TDs, there's councillors, and there's activists and people who are very committed. How do we ensure that we don't take our eye off the ball in terms of peace on this island? Because I mean, that's one thing that scares me. It's the idea of actually taking our eye off the ball and becoming complicit by thinking what's happening in Belfast a couple of weeks ago was something that was happening somewhere else, as opposed to something that was happening just up the road.
Well, first of all, I can't criticize anybody for not knowing what happened, and because I was exactly the same way until the night they shot me. I didn't know anything about politics. I didn't know. I couldn't care less about what was happening in the north, and that's a terrible thing to say. We just thought to ourselves, they're just all a bunch of madmen and women up there, and they're killing each other. Let them at it, and that is the prevailing. It's sad, but it's true. Having said that, when something impacts on you like this, then makes you think, it makes you stand back. But it took me a long time. It took me 30 years to agree with myself to engage with this. And so far be it from me to criticize anybody who hasn't already done that or hasn't thought about it. But I would say that being a political party, and as I said, you know, a party that I think has a massive future, I think that it is incumbent on you to understand and know it. So the first thing you need to do is to understand it. And the best way to understand it is to listen to the voices of the victims, because they're the ones on whom history has impacted most. And they have no agenda other than getting, most of them want the truth, some of them want reconciliation. Often the word enters the narrative, the word forgiveness. You can forget it. Nobody understands what it means. Nobody. It's not a word. It's not in the least bit important. In fact, sometimes it's a hindrance, because to say to somebody who lost their husband or wife or children or fathers and mothers that you must forgive them is arrogant to say. So it doesn't matter. You do not need forgiveness to have reconciliation. So you can put that out. So all the bleeding hearts that think, you know, that this is necessary, it isn't. That's an important thing for yourselves. I think the first thing you need to do is to listen to those voices that are not trying to rewrite history. That's the first thing. I would say then that to engage, you need to be credible. And the most credible thing you can do when dealing with the people who have been impacted and people who are perhaps suspicious of each other, and that's one of the big problems there, is that you need to meet them, to listen to them, and to respect them. It's the big word. It's respect. That is the big word. And to show them that you respect them, not just to say it. You have to show them, and to engage at the grassroots level, as you and I spoke about before, Gary. Grassroots is everything. Politicians come and go, saving your presence, but and the grassroots level very often are at school level, at young people, people who will be the future. They're hardly going to shoot me again, but the thing about it is, you know, there are other young people who may well be impacted, and like the people who are concerned about, say, climate change, are usually the young people whose future is going to be impacted on by these things. So to tell people the real consequences of violence. Again, Gary, you've taken part in some of our events, and we never ever tell people that they should or they shouldn't use violence as a political expedient or as some instrument to change society. We don't tell people that. We don't say don't buy a gun, or don't use a gun. What we do say is, if you do this, if you accept violence or engage in violence as a political expedient or as a way to change society, your story may become our story, or our story may become your story, rather. So, and that's why the storytelling is very, very important. And you saw the effect it had in the school in Inchicore, Gary. It's, you know, to stand there and to tell people the horrors about this does concentrate the mind. We remember we did an event in the City Hotel in Derry, and this was at the beginning of TARP, and we were very careful that we thought, you know, we've got to be careful that we don't make this too stressful and that we don't want to send people away from these events traumatized, because the stories are horrific. I actually mentioned that as part of the talk that I did. And the people of Derry that were there must have been about 100 people there, and they stood up and they were indignant. They said, under no circumstances should you censor this or make it easy for people. We need our people hearing these stories. And we said, well, in that event, we will only tone it down if we're going to schools. And they said, that's the last place you need to tone down these stories. You need to tell, because you saw who was on the streets recently. There were 12, 13, 14-year-old kids.
There's a question there in the chat from Glenn. just in relation to the 12 and 13-year-old kids. Glenn, do you want to ask it? Because I think it's very relevant to the point Stephen was making there.
Yeah, I know you touched on some of the stuff there, but Stephen, I was just saying it was quite unfortunate to see a lot of young people on the streets during the troubles in recent weeks. And it's just, you touched on about if the Soc Dems would, I suppose, branch out into the north, that it couldn't be just a branch. They had to be, I suppose, engaging with projects and taking a different route. And I was just thinking, in your opinion, what is it that's drawing these young people into these situations? And what would you like to see, as opposed to the party, bring to these projects to the table?
Well, there's one word that is absent in their lives. One thing that's absent in these young people's lives, and that's hope. They don't see a future for themselves. They see, the idea that they can. Somebody said, you know what, if you do this, you'll never be able to go to America and go to Disney World. And I mean, it was a joke. People said, I'll never go to Disney World. I don't have a type of job. I don't have these aspirations. And that's the truth. So you need to give them hope, and to engage with young people. That's the very first thing that you need to do, is to say, we respect you. And this respect is not just a word. It also extends to helping in any way we possibly can as you did, Gary, getting people from less privileged places into the Trinity, that project that you had, that we so give people hope, and so that's the reason that they abandon everything. They throw caution to the wind, and they go out and they don't care if they're going to get a police record, or they don't care if they. And yet they need to speak to people, as I have, everybody from the hooded men to, I've spoken to everybody, and I've listened to them all. I've never met anyone other than a psychopath who doesn't have something legitimate to say and some lesson to give us. So we need to talk to them without being condescending. It's very important that we give them hope.
There's an old quote. I think it's from the book Frankenstein. I think before that's from Paradise Lost. That when all hope, when how the monster became the monster, it was like when all hope became lost, evil henceforth became a way of doing good. And I often apply that to lessons around when I see kind of young men getting involved in violence and criminality. That when hope is lost, evil becomes the only way they can do good, because you actually don't know any other way of doing things. Yeah, but. Stephen, in terms of how should we, you mentioned the fact that you haven't talked about the Dublin Monaghan bombings, for example, in the DOP. Yeah, and that happened in my constituency. How do we talk about a past that existed probably before most of us in the call were born? And how do we take ownership of it? And how do we become inheritors of that past? And also, what's the purpose of us doing so?
Well, the first thing I would say is that rather than how you speak about it, the first question has to be, why would you speak about it? That is really, really important. And because you hear so many people say, let's move on, let's forget the past. Well, the reason you would speak about it, Gary, is because moving into the future without understanding the past and knowing about the past is like driving without a rear view mirror. Something can come up behind you, hit you very hard, and you won't even see it happening. So in order to do that, you have to give a reason. You have to give them a reason why they should listen to you in the first place. And that's perhaps the most important reason, is that, and TARP, we have that on our tarp.global thing. We say preserving the past to protect the future. And that's what it is. In school, there were so many subjects that I was bored with. But as you go on later on in life, you realize, well, I'm really sorry I don't know more about calculus or algebra or something like that, because it's come in handy for whatever I'm doing now, or bookkeeping and accounts, get whacked by the tax man. So there are reasons. If you're given a reason to look into these things, and given it can be very, very interesting, just as they proved on the Netflix documentary, that, here's a story that we all take for granted. So what had happened in the past, but we made it interesting. And we have to, unfortunately, today, everything is marketed. We have to market peace. We have to market all of these things. We have to be clever about the marketing as well. So make it to make understanding the past interesting, just as some of these great people who introduced history programs, they make it interesting, and we have to do that.
Yeah. I see Gavin put a question into the chat that I'll read out. Gavin, do you want to call it out yourself? Because I can't actually find my chat function here again.
No problem. I was just wondering, are there lessons from TARP and or lessons from your own experience for maybe for other groups in society where they're dealing with the sort of the history of trauma and the lasting effects of trauma, and particularly people who have been the victim of institutional abuse and that sort of thing? I was very struck with what you said about the truth having to come out and stories having to be told and that sort of thing. And that strikes me as something that maybe is going on in the context of mother and baby homes and institutional abuse as well. So are there lessons that you would have for people involved in that campaign as well?
There are indeed. When we worked with Gary on the counter-radicalization, young people being enticed into violence because they wanted to buy a new pair of trainers or something like that, and they could get money from drug dealers or whatever to become couriers or whatever. So that would be a simple one. With regard to any of these terrible stains on our history, like the Magdalene laundries or the mother and baby homes or any of these things. The one thing that we all have in common, whether it's these events or whether it's the refugees or immigrants or discrimination or sexism or any of these things, one thing we all have in common is pain. So we look for the central, what is it that we have in common? And it is always pain. So to be able to deal with that pain, that can then, whatever resolution we come up with, whatever modus operandi we have in dealing with that pain, then we can apply that to people who suffer pain in other ways, discrimination or any of these things. So wrong is wrong. When it comes to the North, when it comes to the people that I've been dealing now with, not just victims but also with perpetrators. Again, as you saw in the Netflix documentary, it took us a while to get. We managed to get the UVF on in the program, and I can tell you that wasn't easy. They didn't trust. They trusted me for some reason because I had engaged with the craftsman in the writing of the book in 2007. But they didn't trust the media, and even these amazing people from Netflix, they were suspicious. So we had to jump through every hoop. But we did. We got them, and they trusted us. So their pain. There is also a pain in these people, whether they are blasé about it or whether they say, well, whatever we did it for a cause and we believed in it. But I can tell you, in the darkness of night, when they're looking at the ceiling, they have their regrets. They have their doubts about things. And one of the worst experiences, I hope you never have to sit through it, is a deathbed for somebody who's killed people or killed lots of people. And these are the things that have to be discussed. I'm not the only one who can discuss these. I'm not the only one who's experienced them. But to watch somebody in the absolute depths of despair and depression because that person felt that had they ever apologized to their victims or made an attempt to apologize to their victims, that it would have been rebuffed. And I've always said, you don't apologize because you feel that the person is going to accept an apology. You apologize for yourself, not just for the person that you've injured or hurt. So pain is the one thing, and I think we can apply the lessons learned to anybody who's in pain. So I hope that's a long way to go get around an answer for you, Gavin, but I hope it helps.
Stephen, thanks a million. That was really brilliant. I think the last thing I'll say, Stephen, because we're coming at 8 o'clock and I want to keep you beyond that, is I don't know if you read the terms and conditions of signing up with the Social Democrats, but at our national conference, when we can all get together, there's a thing called karaoke. And You're gonna have to dust off the old guitar, Steve.
On now, run. They promise you karaoke and it never happens.
Karaoke always happens. We just send you to another room, Chris.
Yeah, just because you left and went for a nap.
I'm 34. I need a nap.
I'm 43. I manage just fine.
So on the terms and conditions of membership, there will be an expectation of some karaoke, Stephen. We'll. I think you well able for it.
I don't think I'd be very impressed with Gary. When I was in the band, Gary, I never even announced a song. All I ever wanted to be was the bass player, stand beside the drummer and lay down, just get the groove going. But I found myself in this awful position of having to stand up and speak to people, and that was a culture shock for me. It was something I never wanted to do, but you know, as they say, it's a dirty job. Somebody has to do it, and I here I am talking to you. I'd rather if somebody else was, but unfortunately, the people who would have spoke really well to you are dead. So I'm going to try and do it for them.
Well, we're very honoured to have you here, but Wills. I'm incredibly honoured that you've chosen to join the party, and I imagine we're going to be hearing you speaking because we're going to be asking you to speak 1,000 times over the next while, and we're all really looking forward to hearing you in person. And I'm sure you're really looking forward to meeting on karaoke.
Can't wait for that one.
Stephen, thank you so much, my friend.
It's my privilege, Gary. Thanks very much.
You know, it's our privilege. I'll see you soon, buddy. Guys, I think unless that's it for everyone else, I think we'll all say goodbye, yeah? Okay.
Good luck, great evening. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Stephen.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.